Hello, welcome back. This tutorial is going to be about a very simple thing, setting up a camera. It's not going to be long, so let's get started. Right now I have a camera, a main camera 1 here, that is different from the perspective, but it is in the same principle, you'll see in a minute, and it has an animation, so let's watch. The animation from the door opening and the cart moving hasn't changed since the last tutorials about them. The only different thing is now we are not watching them from the perspective window, but a dedicated camera animated to their to the animation of their of these particular objects. Okay, and that's it. So how do we create this? Now you should know that when it's time to put a camera to your video game design, a level design, whatever you might use a camera for a cinematic cutscene or a dedicated camera just showing the door opening animation in somewhere else in the map, you could do those things. You will set up your cameras in the video game editor, whether it's Unity, Unreal Engine, or something else. So we will not be, I mean, you could in some instances do this, but we will not be animating the cameras to be put inside whatever is going on in your game engine. You'll do that inside the game engine. But it is important to understand how a camera could be animated and what kind of techniques and knowledge goes into choosing angles, cinematographic angles for those cameras. So we could play around with the settings in Maya to better understand how to set up a digital camera. So I'm going to go into Create, select Cameras and Camera. You also have the option to pick a camera with aim and up vectors. I'm not going to go into those because it is wholly unnecessary right now. So let's set up a camera. And I'm going to go into the channel box and change it something like main camera 2. Okay? And I'm going to hide this. I don't need it. And I'm going to get back to the quad view, and as you can see I have switched one of my panels to main camera 1. Now I'm going to switch it to main camera 2. This is top Y, front Z, and this was left, I believe, so I figured I don't need left, but I still need the perspective, so that's what I did. So if you go back to main camera, it is an object created on the origin, some like this, with a camera icon. Okay, and I can change the locator scale so that I can better see what is going on. Okay, this is much better. Now I understand that there is indeed a camera here. Alright, and here's my camera view. Now let's go back to Attribute Editor and take a look at what's going on here. Well, first of all, you will have to set up either the focal length or the angle of view. Those two things are connected. They are not unrelated things. You set up one, the other one will change accordingly. We're not going to touch camera scale. Near clip plane, I want to set it to 1 so that when I take a play blast rendering of this, it is not going to create these black let's say fuzziness around thin objects. So let me demonstrate what I mean by that. So perspective window right now, take a look at the perspective window, and if I change the perspective cameras near clip plane to something like this black fuzziness will start to appear around certain edges, okay, certain areas that are too thin. Because the back face and the front face of this object is really close together, and since the range of rendering, the complexity of the rendering has changed nearer to the 0 level, when I get far away from objects this is going to cause issues. But if I get really close, it's not going to cause much problem. Okay, so usually if we are looking at objects from further away, we want to increase the near clip plane to something more respectable, like 1 centimeter. But if you want to really get close to objects within millimeters, this near clip plane will stop working because it is going to clip, essentially. Okay, something like this. If you don't want to see this clipping, you have to decrease it. But this is extremely close, so we don't need that level of, let's say, this this short of a near clip plane. So we can set it to 1 centimeters, basically, to get rid of those black fuzziness. All right. So main camera 2. Near clip plane 1, far clip plane 10,000 centimeters is more than good enough. I mean, if we get really far, it is going to clip around 100 meters, obviously, but we're not going to get that far. Okay? So, how to set up the focal length and the angle of view, and how do we set it up? Why do we set it up the way we do? So let's go to shot distances. So these are regular cinematic shot distances, and this is from the infamous movie, the infamous spaghetti western called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Clint Eastwood's movie, directed by Sergio Leone. And these are basically a plethora of standard cinematic shots. This is extreme close-up, very close-up, big close-up, regular close-up, medium shot from the waist up, medium long shot from the knees up, long shot, we can see everybody now. There's another shot in between called full shot, which shows the human body in its entirety, but not anything else. Very long shot, the distance is growing and growing, and this is the extreme long shot. Basically speaking, this is for establishing shots, for large spaces, for large volumes, large environments. Okay, so in terms of focal lengths, what does this equate to? It is something like this. So this is the focal length versus angle of view chart. You should see that these are the focal lengths in millimeters, and these are the angle of views in degrees. These two things are not just linearly correlated. It's going to change from, let's say, film back to film back, and you'll see that in a minute. What the hell is film back? But this is a pretty good place to begin. So 90 degrees of field of view is about 18 millimeters. But the human attention range, the attention field of view of the human eye is around 45 millimeters. So 35 millimeters, I mean 55 degrees or 45 millimeters. So around 35 millimeters and 50 millimeters, this is the standard cinematic shot for grabbing our attention, visualizing a subject on the screen. If you want to put the attention on a subject, then you should at least shoot it around the 35 millimeter to 50 millimeter range. So, and you go any lower than that, you start to you start to convert your shot into an establishing shot, meaning a long shot. And then if you want to go deeper and deeper, it is either going to zoom in on the subject, like an extreme close-up, or you could use it for long distance shots that you would see from, for example, football matches, or Formula One racing events, or bird watching, or things like that. You would see that in nature documentaries, because the subject and the person who is shooting the subject cannot get very close, right? So that's why we use super telephoto for sporting events or for nature documentaries like wildlife, sports, and for portraits you go to like 100 millimeter to 70 millimeter range. So we're going to be dealing with mostly 50 millimeter to 35 millimeter range, and it is something like this, okay? Close up, medium close up to close up. This is our range, and let's set it up. So let's go back to Maya, and let me, for example, try from the focal length 35. It is already set up to 35. You can try 45, but since this is a relatively sized object, so main camera 2, okay, let's go back, zoom out a bit so we understand what's going on. Let's select this object and focus on it. Okay, this is good, for example. All right, we're happy with the result. Let's go back to Attribute Editor and check out a couple of other things. Okay, so what is then the film back? Film gate, for example, we have some settings here: 16mm theatrical, Super 16, 35mm Academy, TV projection, full aperture, 1.85 projection, anamorphic, 70mm, which is IMAX or VistaVision and things like that. Oh, we have an IMAX here. That is different from 70mm projection, but whatever. So what is the film gate then? Well, film gate, or film back in general, is the object in terms of digital cameras, the digital sensor, or in terms of film cameras, the actual physical film itself that you are projecting your image to. And that has a size as well. And that sizing affects the relationship between your focal length and your angle of view. Because the focal length is set up for 35mm full aperture. Okay, that is the standard. It is when 35mm is exactly this number, whatever this is, okay, 35, 63 degrees, okay, this is 60 degrees only when the film back is exactly 35mm full aperture. But there are many different standards for films and film projections and sensors and digital projections in terms of image creation. So, for instance, the lenses of your cellular phones, your smartphones, are really tiny. That's why they need to use lenses that go well below 7mm, right? Because otherwise you're going to start cropping the image. You're going to decrease the amount of lens you're using, even though the lens millimeter isn't changing. So the best way to visualize it is taking a look at, for example, digital and film sensor chart. You'll see that, for example, Kodak Super 16mm is much smaller than Kodak Academy 35, and these are standard amateur to extreme professional range digital cameras. So these are red and ARRI cameras, which are extremely expensive digital cameras. Like one of them goes for $100,000 or something like that. And some of these, for example, Blackmagic design pocket cameras and things like that, those are extremely affordable amateur to semi-professional cameras. And you also would have Canon's DSLR or mirrorless ranges, and these are Canon's own cinema cameras, but whatever. And you also have Kodak's actual films, chemical films. All right. So, and this is, as you can see, how the lens, how the subject in a lens is how much of an area it is being projected to. Okay. So this is only important. You should know that this thing exists, but this is only important if you're doing actual visual effects production. And if you're designing a scene to match an actually shot image, then you should be aware of the film gate. But since we are doing video game design, we're not going to be concerned with this. But you will still have to select this to match it with Unity's or Unreal Engine's production cycles, so production methods. So because there are settings like these in, for example, Unreal as well. So I would suggest go with either 35 Academy, which equates to about an APS-C sensor, otherwise known as like Canon's and Nikon's standard semi-professional DSLRs will be in the 35 Academy range, 1.6 crop factor that is. And you could also select 35mm full aperture, because these are the things that we can understand. But 16mm theatrical, you will be hard pressed to find a 16mm camera to figure out in real life what kind of an image it looks like. Okay, go with something that you could have experience with. Okay, so I'm going to select 35mm Academy, and as you can see, it is immediately going to crop the image. Why? Because my film sensor is smaller. My digital or imaginary film sensor, virtual film sensor, is smaller than, for example, 35 millimeter full aperture. Okay, it is going to affect, but 70 millimeter, for example, it is going to immediately increase this range to something really large. So I'm going to go with 35 millimeter full aperture, or let's go with Academy. Doesn't matter really. Okay, so let's go back. And I know that this is mostly theoretical knowledge right now that has no actual corresponding meaning in this digital world, especially when we are doing video game design. But video game design, like, it takes a lot of things from other fields and other areas of expertises. It also borrows in large quantities knowledge from cinematography as well. So we need to start understanding cinematography in terms of how we are presenting these virtual objects to the players. So understanding cameras and how they work in real life will help you immensely in setting up your cameras in the virtual world. Okay, so these are my settings, and the fit resolution gate is set to fill, but we need one more thing. We need to set up this system so we understand the range of our the range of our frame, the limits of our frame, because I can play around with the size of this thing and the proportions of this thing, and as you can see, this is starting to become weird, because this is a square image and this is a huge widescreen image, and it is changing. It is constantly changing. So I want to set it up in a way that this will become just one thing, just one frame size. And that is the aspect ratio. I want to set up the aspect ratio so that it is going to become standard no matter how large or small or obtuse this perspective window, this main camera to viewport is sized. And in order to set it up, I first have to go to rendering, and from the render menu turn on render settings. Now it doesn't matter which renderer you select, we are only interested in the final output. In this case my preset is set to HD 110, 1080. What is 110? HD 1080 is obviously 1920 pixels, 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. Okay, this is 1920 by 1080 as we call it in the industry, or HD 1080 is sometimes good enough. Okay, so this is set to basically 1920 by 1080, which is 16 by 9 widescreen resolution. Anything you get from your standard television screen right now, and if you're using a standard monitor, not a curved ultra wide screen, but a standard monitor, you get 1920 by 1080. Or the resolution might change to something like 2560 to 1440, that is 2.5K, but the aspect ratio will be the same. This is 16 by 9, okay, and that device aspect ratio is 1.777, obviously repeating. Okay, so what are we going to do with that value? Well, why do we need that? Well, we need to set up our safe frame. So if you go to view, I believe it was in the view, hopefully, yeah, and camera settings, you can turn on the film gate or the resolution gate. I want to turn on the resolution gate, okay, and the resolution gate will give me this standard resolution with these film back settings with these focal lengths, and it is going to be, unless I change something here, it is going to be the standard. Okay, nothing is changed here. So now when I change the sizing of this viewport window, it is going to stay exactly the same, and this is very necessary to be able to control the framing at all times, because that is what we're trying to achieve, right? Frame this subject or frame whatever in this environment in a standard frame size, and we don't want it to change every time we size the viewport, we resize the viewport. And you can also turn on the save action, and save action is something percentage of this area. We don't want the action to get too close to the edges of the screen. That's for visual comfort. It is not something you should always pay attention to, because things will go inside the frame, move outside the frame. That could happen, obviously, but this is safe action. The safe action tells you that, hey, whatever action is on the screen right now, this is perfectly understandable without without clipping or risking clipping the edges of the frame. You don't want things that you want to see in their entirety get too close to the edges of your frame. So this is not good, right? This is undecided. Is it going to go outside the frame? Is it going to be inside the frame? It is really close. There's a small sliver of background here. You don't want that. You want to, if you want to frame something, either frame it appropriately or do something like this. This is storytelling. This is visual storytelling, because right now I am seeing some of the card and I'm also seeing the background. This is framing, okay? And maybe I want to do something like this. I want to just see the back of the card. But start doing something like this, and this is bad framing because you are undecided of what to do. Okay, so safe frame will give you a basic pointer about how to frame your subjects, and you don't need to. That's the thing. You don't need to frame the subject constantly in the middle of the screen. You'll see in a minute. I'm not going to just follow this object, but as if I'm following my third-person character in a game. I'm going to, make sure that it moves out the frame in some situations, but that is going to be a storytelling choice and not just bad framing. Okay, so let me zero out these rotations, for example. Okay, this is good. Right now I am fully framed. Let me go out just a bit. Okay, this is good, and this is the place I'm going to begin, and let's start animating. So I'm in the first frame, obviously. I'm going to get all of my translations and rotations and just select all of them and hit key selected. Okay, I have the red line here telling me that those values are right now keyframed, and I'm going to scrub forwards. This is good. Okay, and obviously the other viewports will be updated once the animation is over, once my movement is over, because Maya only updates one viewport at a time, in real time. Okay, so right now I am trying to find another framing. Okay, maybe I should start getting back to reveal the door, something like this. This is not bad. These are already selected. Key again, move forward, and right around here, the 130 mark, this card will stop, and then the door animation will start. So I'm going to go about here, like 150. Maybe move back a little bit more to show the door and the opening animation. Not bad. Let me do something like this. Key selected. Okay, and now I want to stop here for a second, for a couple of seconds maybe, and then moving the camera to visualize the entire door animation. So I don't want to keep the camera moving at all times. Like, I want to give that is another important thing. You want to provide enough time to your audience so that they could understand the action. Like, this is a relatively smooth animation. Like, the cart is moving gently, the door animation is happening gently, so I don't want to keep the camera moving at all times. That's not good cinematography. And this is something we call motivated camera movement. You have to have a motivation for the camera to move. If the camera is moving, it has to have a motivation. Why is it moving? Is it tracking something? Is it going from a close-up to a long-range shot, right? Why is it moving? Is it panning? I mean, rotating in an axis? Is it doing that to reveal something new that was once outside the frame? Is it trying to change the framing? Is it trying to track an object as it moves? Is it trying to move away from the action so that we can cut to another scene? Why is it moving? So in this situation, its movement is unmotivated. I mean, if I keep moving when the door is opening, it is going to be unmotivated. But I don't want to keep watching this for a long duration. Like this door animation takes like 10 to 15 seconds, and I don't want to keep the door animation on the screen without changing the camera angle for that long, because I'm going to bore my audience to death. So I want to give them the anticipation of the continuation of this animation. So I'm going to raise the camera a little bit and start pushing in before this cart actually starts moving on these platforms. All right, but before I begin that animation, now that I have tracked my object and my object has stopped, I want to give them time to absorb that information as well. And all of this long explanation is for telling you that this position here, I'm going to hold it for about 3 or 4 seconds. that is why this entire explanation happened. Okay, so I'm going to keep this animation from 150 to like 250 range. So to do that easily, I'm going to go to my custom shelf and turn on the graph editor. Now, in order to play around with the graph editor while still being able to see this camera animation, I'm going to dock it to right around here. Okay, now I'm going to squeeze it down so that I could understand what's going on, and I'm going to maximize this as well, because I can do my animation from here, which is much easier. In the graph editor, my time snap is on. I'm not concerned about the value snaps, on the other hand, because value snaps could have these telephone numbers of values. I don't care. Okay, so this is a camera animation after all. Like, doesn't matter if these numbers are integers or not. In my book, it's perfectly fine. But but the time snap is on, so I am exactly animating on the frames and not between the frames. Okay, so I want to go. I want to select all of these. Okay, these keyframes. Control C to copy them. Go to 250. Okay, and paste. Right? So I am right now holding this animation for this 100 frames or so. But then I'm going to go to, let's watch the animation. This happens, and around the 5:30 mark, as I remember correctly, this cart will start moving. But before the cart starts moving, okay, I want to first of all get almost an isometric top-down shot of this door, and then start moving through the door. Okay, and the cart will move from the side. It's first going to leave the frame and then punch into the frame as I'm going through the door and become the focus of my motivation, of my camera motivation again. Okay, so around the 450 mark, I want to do something like this. And this is, I'm not going to, since this is a very long distance, like 200 frames of animation, my animation is not going to be super sharp, super quick. I want to do it very gently. As the animation is progressing, I am raising the camera to visualize this door in its entirety. Then around the 450 mark, or let's say 430 mark, okay, I'm going to start pushing in through this opening. Okay, so 430, good enough. Am I happy with the result? Yeah, why not? So key selected, and 5:30 the cart will start moving. So around 5:30 or maybe even 5:40, I want to be somewhere here. Okay. Now, since trying to push in is not going to work, I can basically go to top view, as you can see. Okay. and do something like this. I mean, this is the edge of the door, and I don't want to get too close to the edge of the door. So I don't want to clip these objects after all, and I don't want this cart to clip me as I'm moving forwards as well. So I have to pay attention to the objects around me, because I mean, this is a digital camera after all. It can go through objects. I don't want them to go through the objects. I want this thing to feel smooth and realistic. So I'm going to put the camera somewhere here, because it's not going to, you know, clash with the cart or the geometry of the door. Let's take a look at it from this side as well. Okay, this is not bad. All right, maybe a little higher. I'm happy with it. So right now I'm in the 540. So key selected. Okay, and let me go back here and let's watch. Okay. And this is the time to start watching. Why? Because as you can see, my cameras in position and out position are perfectly okay. I'm happy with the results. The transition in between is really, really weird. Like, what the hell is going on here? Okay, so my camera is first rotating to an empty space that I am not at all interested in. And it's getting really, really dangerously close to the edge of the door, and then finally revealing itself around here. But what I want to do is basically push in the camera in an arc. So in that context, that's why we need the graph editor. Because in the graph editor, I can practically go in and start playing around with these values and how this animation happens, so that this doesn't happen, so that my camera doesn't look somewhere weird during this transition. And in order to do that, let's go to here, get close, and first of all, let's make sure that these things are locked between each other. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, first of all, do what am I going to do? Clamp these tangents. Okay, now nothing has happened, but what I'm trying to do is basically this. If this is not clamped, okay, if it's automatic when I change this, or if it's in the wrong setting, I'm trying to find the wrong setting right here, like auto tangent maybe. I mean, these things have a tendency to move, do something like this, right? I don't want it to do this for some reason, okay? Sometimes one of these settings will cause that. I don't want it to do this. I want this thing to be perfectly flat, because at that point in time, I'm not moving the camera, I'm not rotating the camera, okay? And I want to keep it that way. But if for some reason this movement changes this, then even though I am interested in the animation of what is going on here or over here, this animation will also change, which I don't want. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to achieve here. So everything seems to be fine. So as you can see, this is going to allow me to do certain animations or control certain movements. Okay, so the values I'm okay with, but the movement, the graph itself, I am not. So what is going on here? I am right now moving in both the Z direction and the X direction in general, while also dropping in the Y value. But the thing is, the Z movement is okay, but the X movement is doing this kind of an arc, which I don't want. So in the X movement, I want to change some of these things. Okay, so maybe if I do this, let's see, let's try. Okay, this is much better now. All right, so this is weird. This is what I'm talking about. This thing has changed. I don't want to change that thing. Okay, so let's clamp these tangents. Let's clamp it. Please clamp it. Okay, it's still not clamping. Okay, I want to change this. Let's break apart these values then. Unify the tangents. Like, let's break these tangents. Okay. But this is going to be a very sharp transition, which I don't want. Okay. The free tangent length is selected. Let me go over to spline. Working. Maybe let's try a plateau. Okay, let's break the tangents again. And this is not going to work the way I intended, so maybe I'm going to try this. Okay. So let's try. Okay, this is much better, but now I'm way too forwards and it's going to snap back, which is really, really weird. Okay. Okay, this is getting better. But there are a couple of things. First of all, my camera is pointing way too high. I want to point it downwards. And what is that movement? Let's see what value is changing. Let's watch rotate X, Y, Z. Okay, rotate X and Y is changing. All right, both of them are changing. And they are changing to negative degrees. So I want to keep this to a negative degree. So rotate X and Y. Okay, they are both negative, but I want to keep them even more negative. Okay, some like this. And this final transition is very sharp, which I don't want. Okay. And maybe not do them both at the same time. Okay, this is much better. Okay, let's watch. This sharp transition at the end is really weird, but I'm going to fix that later when I finally set up the last camera position, or the last two camera positions, let's say. Okay, so am I happy with the results? Let's watch again. Okay, it's a bit weird. It's a bit weird, let me tell you that. And maybe we should set up the rest of it after deciding on what's going to happen next. So I'm going to once again select everything. And what I want to happen next is this thing will move forwards. And I want to follow it around to the point where it will stop. And that happens in the 650 point. And before it stops around 630, I want to break away from it once again. Okay, and after breaking away, I want to reveal where it ends up stopping. That's what I want to do. So 630 mark, let's go in. Let me select this and just hit F to point this camera, to focus this camera on it, like nothing is going to change. My main camera settings hasn't changed. The focal length is exactly the same. Okay? And I'm semi-happy with this. Maybe don't follow it that closely. This is good. Key selected. And finally, I'm going to go into the 700 point and just reveal the position where it's at. Okay. In the future, obviously, I'm going to change this camera angle once I set up my robot arm to pick something from it, and the animation will keep going on to reveal the actions of the robot arm. But until then, I'm perfectly fine with revealing the final location, the resting position of this card. Okay, so 700, key selected, this is good enough. And let's watch. I'm pushing in. Ooh, this is really weird. Okay, so this is something that I need to fix. Let's go back and see what's going on. So the first things first, this is the one causing the issue, because this is what the translate X motion, which is our, let's go back here. The X is our lateral motion, and as you can see, it has reached this point and now it is flipping to the side and then once again flipping to the other side. So this plateau and this mountain here, that is what's causing the issue. So I'm going to make sure that this is perfectly fine. Okay, so let's watch. And once again, we have another problem. We have a problem with the rotation, I believe. If you look at the camera's rotation, it is, or tilting action, it is first looking slightly downwards, then it's looking slightly upwards, and then plateauing once again around here. Okay? Okay, these are really, really weird, which I don't want. Okay? So let me go to around here. So rotate Y is perfectly okay, but rotate X is freaking out. Okay, let me get these things and clamp them. Okay, much better. Then we have other issues to fix, but whatever, we'll figure it out. Okay, then let's go to translate X. Translate X can also be clamped, I believe. Okay, which is good. And I want to play around with the overall timing as well. Like, this is not bad, but this is really quick, which I don't want. I want to give it more time. So right around here, around the 4:30 mark, right? We're in the 4:30. Okay, so selection in all panels. Okay, let's click this and see everything. So 4:30, I can sacrifice 30 frames from the last animation. So I'm going to select all of these and move them, but I don't want to change the values. And if I do this, basically it's not going to work. So before I click, I mean, I have selected all of them, but before I move them, I'm going to press and hold Shift. And I should do that before, this is the quick bit, I should do that before I click them. Okay, then I'm going to move them, push them to the side to 400. Alternatively, you can just select all of them and type in whatever. Okay, you can do that as well. So I've sacrificed around 30 frames for this camera movement, slightly upwards and downward angle. I have sacrificed 30 frames from that part of the animation, and I have added it to this pushing in. Okay. All right. What I'm not happy with is the panning action of the camera is happening really fast at the end. Okay, so I'm going to go to rotate whatever. Let me see. Okay, it is rotate Y. Okay. Let me go to rotate Y. Yeah, rotate Y is let me try to clamp these, okay, as much as possible. Sorry. Okay, let me see again. Much better, much better. Let's see. Okay, but still I am focusing on the edge of this door, which is very weird. Okay, so right around here somewhere. I want to be going in through this door, right? And maybe I should start changing the value so I can better match what is going on here later. Okay? Okay, this is much better. Let's see. Okay, and the last movement is a bit too much. So what I'm going to do is, since I'm happy with the results over here, I'm going to sacrifice from this area a little bit and give it some space at the end of the animation so I can fix this transition and do it more smoothly. Okay, so shift and hold, move it a little bit to the side. Okay, that's good enough. But what's going to happen next is, first of all, we have the same problem once again. Our camera is looking nowhere. Okay, but I want this rotation to be precise and relatively following the action, even though the action has stopped. Okay, so we are once again with the rotate X and Y, and over here I need this transition to start something like this. And this is a bit weird. Let's keep it tasteful. Uh-oh, that's not what I want. Nope, that's not what I want either. So let me get it over here. Okay. Okay. So what I can do here is perhaps do this. Oops. Give it some space. Start the transition. Okay, let's clamp these. Still forget the clamp tool. get this. Something like this, not bad. Okay, this is much better now. I mean, we could still adjust it, but as you can see, small movements do the trick. And what I did was, first of all, instead of animating at this point, animating the translate X, Y, and Z and rotate X, Y, and Z all at the same point, I have modified the positions of rotate X, Y, and X and Y to different locations so that their animation could start earlier, or their transitional points could start earlier than those of the actual translations. Okay, and you could do that for all other things as well. Like if you want to begin this rotation before the position animation, that could work as well. For example, let's go to rotate X and Y once again, and for example push them in much earlier. So this could very well work to our advantage. And let's, for example, do something like this. This is good. Okay, and still the translate X is lagging behind, so I want to start it early as well. Okay, if I start it early, maybe it's going to work. This is good. But there's a small jerking action here, which I don't want. So if it's lagging behind, maybe its completion should be earlier. Okay, let's try. Much better. Now I am trying to reveal what's behind the door as opposed to trying to focus on the corner of the door. And I can maybe even push it a little bit closer. So now I am going under the lights, and in a minute, in a few seconds, the cart will catch up with me. And I am not still reaching the back end of the cart really quickly, so maybe my translate Z has to be closer. Let's see. Once again, I am looking the bottom of the tracks. Maybe that's not something I want. So let's play around with rotate X. Yeah, this rotate X value could do much better around here somewhere. And let me do this in a spline manner. Sorry, let's go to spline. Okay, so that the transition is relatively smooth. And that's good. Okay, let's select everything, see what's going on. Okay, the rating part, oh, there you can see This is what I'm talking about. So let's watch these 100 frames. I want this camera to be standing still with no rotations and no translations, right? So watch it. In these 100 frames, the camera is slightly bobbing, and that is not something I want. So let's go to here. Around here somewhere, the camera has a bobbing animation. So I'm going to clamp these values. That's what I mean by having to clamp everything. So now the bobbing animation will be gone. Okay, we're fully stopped. Nothing is changing. And we do the new animation for revealing the door. Now we are pushing in, revealing what's behind the door. The cart is catching up with us. Okay, not bad. I mean, it could be better, but you get the idea. This is how we do the camera animation and how we can play with the graph editor. Similar to the first thing you have done in the class, the bouncing ball animation. You need to be able to, you need the control over these multiple values at the same time in order to figure out those smooth camera motions, those smooth camera movements, and you should know when to stop, when to actually follow an object, when to look at the action so we can see everything. I mean, the basic idea here is I'm not only showcasing this event that is happening, but I'm also showcasing the objects in question. I can clearly see that the wheels on this thing are rotating. It is following a track, and it reaches a door, and the door animation is progressing. I mean, I can see almost everything about the door aside from these pistons underneath it, which is really hard to show. You need a dedicated camera angle to show those things if you really want, but you get the idea. I am showcasing the entire animation cycle cleanly, mostly cleanly, but then later on I could finish this animation to reveal the robot arm and everything. So that was it. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm eagerly expecting to see your camera animations in the next week. See you then. Bye bye.